Harlan Sanders, or Colonel Sanders,
I mean, his
as he's later
origin is
known,
when he was born.
on a farm in Indiana on September 9th, 1890. He came
started
from
his
very
birth.
humble beginnings, and at just 5 years old, his father passed away.
Oh, that's
in order
rough.
for the family to survive, his mother was forced to take on lots of odd jobs like sewing and working at a canning factory. This
So
meant
I'm sorry. So hold on. I do want to say before we get going is that I was thinking about it. He does have one. I can think of one aspect where he has some kind of legal ground in this, right? One aspect that he has any legal ground to sue over this is that it's his image, right? If when he sold it, he sold KFC as the brand. Yes. You can, if he didn't negotiate for it, you can 100% not have to change the logo. Yes. Which has his face. Yes. But the logo is different than the person. They have since made a game. I love you. The finger licking. I love you, Colonel Sanders. The finger licking good dating simulator. A movie with a very interesting plot. We'll have to talk about that sometime. And my God, it's a lot of stuff that, when it comes down to it, they have made about him in regards to his image and I guess even their own way writing the story of who Colonel Sanders is, even though they only bought like the franchise, right? So I guess I could see that being what he sues over in like a weird defamation case, but even then, that's like super like iffy, you know? It's not like, you gotta have a judge that's really like, you know what, you're right, this poor old man, he was tricked, you know? What'd you miss? Oh, nothing. So basically, when I got back here, I'll rewind it a minute for you, Kirby, right here, because so basically all I was saying is that initially I was saying like he doesn't have any legs to stand on, right, for the lawsuit itself. The thing is though, I was thinking about it because technically they bought. So to kind of recap what I said, so that everyone else can hear it again, is that they bought the brand, but not the image of Colonel Sanders, and they made more than just KFC or expanding the brand. They made lore about Colonel Sanders, dating game, a movie, etc. It talks about who Colonel Sanders is, and they technically may not have bought that, so I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of that he has a leg to stand on. But even then, you know, someone's got to be very
Years old. Is the same company that I sold for $2 million sold for $240
they gotta like feel like
million
pity for
yesterday.
this man, because that's still
I didn't
$2
get
million.
any
You didn't get 240 million. Ugh. Like no judge is really gonna be like, oh my God, this poor man. He sold $2 million instead of keeping the franchise he had. Oh, this poor idiot old man. Like most judges aren't gonna do that, right?
Harlan Sanders, or Colonel Sanders as he'd later be known, was born on a farm in Indiana on September 9th, 1890. He came from very humble beginnings, and at just 5 years old, his father passed away. In order for the family to survive, his mother was forced to take on lots of odd jobs like sewing and working at a canning factory. This meant from a very young age, Sanders had to look after his 2 younger siblings, which led him to practicing his cooking from as young as 7 years old. He'd often stay up late developing his skills, and thus began to become a very good cook. At age 10, Sanders got a job working on a farm, but ended up getting fired because he spent so much time with the animals instead of actually doing the jobs he was meant to. His mother was furious he'd lost the job. She told him, "You're just no good. Here I am, left alone with you 3 children to support, and you won't even work enough so somebody will keep you. I guess I'll never be able to count on you." Sanders felt ashamed and vowed in that moment he would make a success of his life. However, shortly after this, Sanders' life actually got much worse, as his mother remarried to a violent man who treated his new stepkids terribly. He was very
kinda
clear about the
fucked.
fact he
Oh
didn't
my
want
God.
them. And so, at age 12, Sanders moved out of his home and went to make his own way in the world. He managed to get a job at another farm and would get up before dawn to feed the animals, then go to school during the day and take on any other work he could get in the evenings.
That's so
Unfortunately,
sad.
it was all too much, and since Sanders hated school, in particular algebra, he dropped out at just 13 years old, merely a few weeks into the 7th grade.
Damn. Right, yeah, he's already in the 1%. See, just because you came from humble beginnings, though, doesn't mean you know.
Sanders would go on to try a huge variety of different jobs in his early years. These included becoming a streetcar conductor, an insurance salesman, tire salesman,
what the
steamboat
fuck?
operator, midwife, secretary, and a carriage painter. He even had a brief
What?
stint in the US Army as a soldier and served in Cuba when he was just 15 years old.
My
Although
dude.
this wasn't how he became known as a colonel, as he was only in the army for about 6 months before getting discharged, most likely because he was found to have been underage. By the time he turned 18, Sanders got married and then went on to have 3 kids. Of course, he needed money to support his family and decided to try and get a more professional job working in the legal field. He took a law course that was done via mail, but his law career ended when he got into a courtroom brawl with one of his own clients, which destroyed his reputation. So, Sanders later got a job working at the railroad, but when he got fired from that as well, his wife Josephine decided to leave him. She reportedly gave away all their furniture and household goods and took their kids back to her parents' house. Sanders was distraught by this. He'd not only lost his job, he'd now seemingly lost his family.
Yeah,
He went over
also
to their house
your
and hid in the woods with a plan to
fucking
essentially
house.
kidnap his kids and take them home with him when they came outside to play.
Whoa.
But thankfully, at the last moment, he instead decided to speak with his father-in-law, who made him see sense. And so Sanders instead went inside to make things right with his wife and eventually got back together with her. However, Sanders just couldn't catch a break, because even that would end in tragedy. In 1947, Sanders divorced his wife after one of their sons died at just 20 years old. Their marriage had fallen apart soon after because they both struggled to come to terms with the grief. So, as you can see, the first half of Harlan Sanders' life was plagued with failures and sadness. But luckily, a very unlikely development was about to change his life forever.
That's a lot. That was all his fault? Like, what?
At age 40, Sanders got a job in Kentucky with Shell, running a gas station. And to make extra money, Sanders decided to make meals for his customers from the back room, given that he was a skilled cook.
Wait, I'm sorry, hold on, what?
Sanders decided to job in Kentucky with Shell, running a gas station. And to make extra money, Sanders decided to make meals for his customers from the back room, given that he was a skilled cook. He put out a single table that seated 6 people and sold ham, steaks, string beans, and hot biscuits. Fried chicken initially wasn't on the menu though, as it took too long to prepare, about 30 to 35 minutes, so he couldn't keep up with the demand. He knew that deep frying was one way to cook it faster, but this generally made the chicken way too dry, crusty, and unevenly cooked. But then Sanders made a massive breakthrough. You see, around this time, pressure cookers were becoming more widely sold, and although they were typically used for vegetables, Sanders decided to try it for chicken. It took a lot of experimentation to find the right settings and balance of time, pressure, fat, and filtration, but eventually, Sanders figured out a way to cook chicken in just 8 or 9 minutes, while still keeping the chicken's flavor. And it only got even better when Sanders tried a new seasoning blend, which he'd later call his secret blend of 11 herbs and spices. Very quickly, the chicken became a bestseller and was a massive hit with travelers passing through. To help increase sales further, Sanders advertised his gas station food by painting ads on barn doors in the local area, which proved to be great marketing. However, a competitor nearby called Matt Stewart was extremely annoyed by Sanders' aggressive promotion and begun painting over the signs Sanders had put up.
That's just rude.
Sanders warned him he'd shoot him if he didn't stop, but Stewart carried on painting over his ads anyway. So Sanders, along with 2 managers of the gas station he operated, went to pay Matt Stewart a visit. However, when Stewart saw them coming, he immediately pulled out his own gun and fired. The bullet narrowly missed Sanders and instead—
There! Boom! Boom! Right there. That is how... all he had to do was show up. That guy, if he would have just threatened and told them to leave, that's one thing. The fact that he fired, boom, Sanders just won.
It hit one of the managers Sanders had gone with. He died immediately. Sanders grabbed his own gun and returned fire, hitting Stewart in the shoulder. All men were arrested by the police after this shootout, and Stewart got 18 years in prison for murder, while Sanders didn't serve any jail time as he fired in self-defense.
There we go.
Extremely close call for.
That is so stupid. Holy shit, he could have died.
Sanders. But the end result was his competitor was now behind bars, leaving him to dominate the local area.
You are
Sales of his
so
gas station food
fucking
soared
lucky.
rapidly, especially his fried chicken. He could barely keep up with the demand.
Dude,
in fact,
that
Sanders built
lucky
up such a
bitch.
reputation that in 1935, the governor of Kentucky, Ruby Laffoon, bestowed him with the honorary title of colonel in recognition of his contributions to the state's cuisine. So the colonel title was honorary, nothing to do with his military rank.
What?
But Sanders still embraced it fully, and from then on he went by Colonel Sanders, with many simply referring to him as the Colonel instead of his real name Harland. That same year, the demand for Colonel Sanders' food meant he needed to move out of the gas station and instead opened up a 142-seat restaurant. It had taken him until his 40s, but he finally seemed to have found success. But soon Sanders' bad luck seemed to have returned, as in 1939, his restaurant burnt down. And by the time it was rebuilt, World War II had broken out, meaning there were no tourists or travelers passing through, which had been his main source of customers, and so he ultimately had to sell the place. But he didn't give up. When the war was over, Sanders started a new restaurant, which was successful until the 50s. Then the next bit of bad news came in the form of a new interstate highway that was being built, which bypassed Sanders' location completely, thus drastically cutting his sales.
Ouch.
He was ultimately forced to auction off the business at a loss. And so, at the age of 65, he now had no business and no other income except his savings, and thus had to rely on his social security check of just $105 a month. Now, there is some misinformation online that says Sanders nearly ended his life at this point.
Jesus.
But there's actually no evidence of that. In fact, quite the opposite.
Why would people
Sanders
write that?
was a very determined man, and he wasn't going to give up that easily. He said in his biography, "If I hadn't been 66 years old and had a $105 security check coming in every month, I don't know what I would have done. But for me, it wasn't a matter of giving up, it was just a problem of what to do next." And so, despite being at retirement age, Colonel Sanders was really just getting started. And little did he know, he was on the verge of his biggest breakthrough yet.
So yeah, this guy's even less requiring to have got anything of that 240 million then, right? Because he fucked up every business he had. He probably barely got it to the point where it was worth 2 million and then could sell it. He sold it for 2 million, and who he sold it to are the ones who actually made it good then. I guarantee, because I now that I'm seeing what happened, no wonder he sold it. Take the 2 million after all that shit you fucked up and just go, dude. Like, why are you throwing a hissy fit as an old man? Why are you throwing a hissy fit? What the hell?
What about if instead of running a restaurant himself, he could franchise? He'd let other restaurants sell his chicken and charge 4 cents for every chicken sold. So Sanders put a bunch of pressure cookers in his car, along with a big bag of his famous seasoning, and hit the road in his 1946 Ford. His plan was to travel all across the United States, finding potential franchisee restaurants. But it certainly wasn't an easy life. He had to live out of his car, and it was exhausting traveling non-stop. When he came across a restaurant he thought looked suitable, he'd convince the owner to let him cook his chicken for their employees, and if they liked it, he'd stay for a few days to cook for their customers, hoping they'd like it so much that the restaurant wanted to become a franchisee of his chicken. For a while, Sanders was met with rejection after rejection. He was reportedly turned down 1,009 times before finally getting someone to agree.
Shit,
How
that's so
tempting it must have
stupid.
been to quit after 1,000 rejections. But Sanders had just kept going. His first successful franchise came in 1952, when Pete Harmon of South Salt Lake in Utah agreed to sell Sanders chicken. Harmon owned a large chain of restaurants already, and said his sales tripled in the first year once he began selling the Colonel's Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe. In fact, it was actually this first franchisee, Pete Harmon, who coined the phrase "finger-licking good," which later became the slogan across the whole KFC chain. Within a couple of years, everything had changed, and Sanders didn't need to make those long road trips anymore to find new partners. People started coming to him instead, as word about his chicken spread rapidly across the country.
Okay.
Of course, Sanders didn't share the exact recipe with franchisees, as he was scared competitors would end up copying it, so he sent the spice blend pre-made. Plus, Sanders always seemed to have a talent for marketing, and clearly recognized that the idea of a secret recipe generated a lot more intrigue. By the end of 1963, he'd franchised over 600 outlets across the US and Canada, and built a company worth millions.
I mean, valid though.
Within a couple of years, that would be 900 outlets, including some in the UK and Japan. His chicken was a huge hit, and the franchise model was a massive
So you
success.
did something
Sanders
good
had
for
finally
once.
made
Fair
it,
enough.
and
That's
at
what
long
you get 2
last
million.
was financially secure. But
That's what you get 2 million.
that is certainly not the end of the story.
That's how you get 2 million and move on with your life.
KFC was thriving. But then one day, a group of entrepreneurs and investors, led by a 29-year-old named John Brown, came to Sanders with an offer. They wanted to buy his business. John had been shocked when he'd learned that KFC didn't even have a sales team, and was simply relying on restaurant owners coming to KFC through word of mouth in order to open up their own KFC franchise. John said to his partners,
like
"We
chicken
owned
liver.
this company. Imagine how quickly we could expand it if we were more aggressive with sales." So they
Human
made Sanders an offer
flesh.
to buy KFC. Initially, Sanders turned them down. His business was like a child to him, and he was concerned they'd ruin it. But John wouldn't let it go. He upped his offer to buy KFC to $2 million and swore he'd never tamper with the Colonel's recipe and would always maintain a high degree of quality control. He also said he wanted Sanders to stay on as an advisor and ambassador for the company, as he believed having Sanders as the face of the company was one of their biggest marketing assets. So in 1964, Sanders finally agreed to sell his business. He was 73 at this point, and
Yeah,
figured
like
this would allow him a
fungus.
little more time to enjoy the final stages of his life. Once the sale went through, Sanders was officially a millionaire. Although, in truth, he barely stepped away from KFC at all. Sanders enjoyed being part of publicity campaigns and ended up traveling all over the world for various promotions,
So,
as well as making
tell me he got
appearances
paid
on
for it
many
at
different
least.
TV ads. He simply leaned into the whole thing, wearing his iconic white suit every day. Meanwhile, John and the other entrepreneurs who'd taken over KFC's management made some important changes that helped the business grow and open many new locations.
Yeah, see?
However, in
They did the work.
1971, John Brown sold the company to a giant food conglomerate, and that's when everything began to change.
Now, why would you be owed anything, my dude? Right there, you're an idiot. You sold it too early.
Unlike
you don't
John,
have
who'd
anything.
agreed
You
not to
agreed
tamper
to
with
it.
the Colonel's
He
recipe.
wanted to go out, so that means he agreed to the act of using his image. Then, right? That means he has no legs to stand on at all. The legs I thought he had, he doesn't have. He doesn't even have those legs. So, like, that's rough, bro. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that's real rough, man. But that's really not... Like, you don't got no legs. I'm sorry, you don't.
The new owners of KFC did
I
not
feel bad
do
for
that.
him.
For example,
Like,
they
he's
changed
obviously
the
not that-
gravy to a
not that-
version that was much cheaper and easier to make. A company executive at the time said, "Let's face it, the Colonel's gravy was fantastic, but you had to be a Rhodes Scholar to cook it." KFC were expanding quickly and wanted to streamline
Rhodes
faster
Scholar?
and easier to make. He did not do that. For example, not to tamper with the Colonel's recipes, the new owners of KFC did not do that. For
Yeah.
example, they changed the gravy to a version that was much cheaper and easier to make. A company executive at the time said, "Let's face it, the Colonel's gravy was fantastic,
Yeah.
but you had to be a Rhodes Scholar to cook it." KFC were expanding quickly and wanted to
Oh,
streamline.
Rhodes. I thought
and
it was
so
like ROAD.
basically, they'd
I'm
made
an
some
idiot, sorry.
changes. The thing is, Sanders still visited lots of KFC stores himself, and when he tried the new recipe, he said, "My god, that gravy is horrible. They ought not to be allowed to sell it. It's pure wallpaper paste." Sanders wasn't any more complimentary about the chicken either, saying it was nothing but a damn fried dough ball stuck on some chicken. His
So tell me this, though. Did you make them sign a thing that said they could never sell it? No.
criticism was so harsh and so public that one KFC franchisee sued him for libel in 1978. But the case was thrown out.
Yeah,
However,
idiot.
Sanders was so unhappy with the direction
fuck?
KFC was taking under
Sorry,
the
that guy was
owners,
also
he opened up his
stupid.
own competing restaurant
People
under
just
the
don't
name
understand
Claudia
how things
Sanders,
work, mate.
the Colonel's Lady Dinner House. This then led to KFC suing Sanders. In other words, the new owners suing the founder of the company.
Wait, what?
and Claudia Sanders taking under the new owners. He opened up his own competing restaurant under the name Claudia Sanders, the
That
Colonel's
just
Lady
shooketh
Dinner
me.
House.
What?
This then led to KFC suing Sanders.
Yeah, dude, you
In other
sold
words,
your
the
name.
new
You don't get
owners
to start
suing the
another
founder of
chicken
the
chain.
company. And it was a bitter lawsuit over
What
the
the
copyright of his name
fuck?
and whether he should be allowed to open a competing business using the Colonel branding. In retaliation, Sanders
No.
then attempted to sue the new owners in a separate legal battle, alleging they misused his image in promoting products he hadn't developed. And Sanders was demanding $122 million in
That's
damages.
the brand, brother.
Eventually, they settled, and Sanders got paid $1 million, but had to rename
Ha!
his competing restaurant to simply Claudia Sanders Dinner House. And by the way, that restaurant still exists today, and is the only place to get the original Colonel Sanders fried chicken. But still, Sanders was a fighter until the end. But in 1980, he died from acute leukemia, aged 90. He was still working until a month before his death, as he said he had no interest in retiring and sitting around doing nothing. As of today,
All right,
there are over
hey,
25,000
hustle. I love
KFC
it.
outlets around the world.
I do enjoy
and it all
that.
started with a guy cooking chicken in a gas station. Despite constant failures, rejections, and tragedies, Sanders kept going, started his new business model at 65.
To be fair, he
became a millionaire by
kinda got
74.
one dude
In the
killed
famous words of
and
Colonel
was planning
Sanders
on
himself,
killing another
one has
dude.
to remember that every failure can be a stepping stone to something better. And if you want to see another entrepreneurial success story like this, check out my video on how Netflix built their empire and defeated Blockbuster. This Netflix video was a long time in the making, and I think you'll really like it, so just click here to watch it now, and I'll see you there.
Dude, what? That like hurt my head. Yeah, an hour. Yeah, no way we're watching an hour. I'm interested in the Tinder one just because I'm interested in what the hell that was even about, but oh wow, that was special. Legally, that was special.